We can be totally disconnected from our body after trauma, or we can be so acutely aware of our body after trauma. You put experiences like that consequentially together over a long period of time, that's going to cause developmental trauma.
Ailey is a leading voice in somatic psychology. She was a professional ballerina and Miss Canada before her own trauma led her to become a chartered psychologist.
Creating kind of a beautiful image on the outside was one of the ways I distracted away while I was hiding all this self-hatred. For me, both of those choices were really driven by trauma. Until that stuff is really acknowledged, it does continue to play out.
We'll explore nervous system dysregulation, anxiety, and burnout. We're going to come on to our section called Real or Real.
Why do people burn out then, in your view?
When people win, they are rarely burnt out at that moment. It's not a negative to feel overwhelmed because you have responsibility. People depend on you. People are relying on you to do something great.
Thoughts? Good question.
Before we get into the episode, I'm super excited to share with you a brand that captures exactly what this podcast is all about. Science-led, evidence-backed progress in women's health. Today's sponsor, Smart Strains, has developed a range of clinically proven live bacterial supplements, each designed for a specific health need and only formulations backed by clinical trials and recommended by global health guidelines. No vague promises or one-size-fits-all blend like so many others you see on the shelves today. Make sure to check out their website to learn more about the live bacteria formulations that genuinely make a difference. And thank you so much to Smart Strains for sponsoring today's episode. I'm so excited that Smart Strains have even given you guys an exclusive code for 20% off. Just use the code FAY20 at checkout. Limited to one use per customer and can't be used alongside any other discounts. But first, please do not forget to subscribe or leave a 5-star review on whatever platform you're using to listen to this podcast. It really, really helps us grow so that we can continue to help you live a happier, healthier life. Thank you. Ailey, our community sent in so many questions about stress and anxiety. But first, I read that you were a prima ballerina and Miss Canada at 19.
Yes.
And then you decided to become a somatic psychotherapist. Could you explain what led you to go into this? And also, in really simple terms, what is a somatic psychotherapist?
So I will define somatic psychotherapist just so that people understand what I do and how it's maybe different. So a somatic psychotherapist is trained clinically in the same way a regular psychotherapist would be trained. So we are trained to listen to stories, to know how to process trauma, to weave cognitive narratives together, to reframe. We have that skill set, but we also have additional skill set of both listening to the story that someone is saying through their words, but also the story of the body. So that means I'm going to notice when your eye contact breaks. I'm going to notice how many times you blinked. I'm going to notice, okay, your breath is actually not moving into your abdominal cavity. And I'm going to use what I notice. I'm going to gather evidence and through my time together, but also through what I experience in my body. So I have to kind of already know, did I come into this session anxious? Did I come in a little stressed or with tension? I didn't. So actually sitting in the presence of this person after a few moments, I'm really tense or I'm really anxious. And we're going to kind of have a little bit of an inner dialogue around what's going on with our body that we may be picking up from the other. Because we know, and you could probably add to this, our mirror neurons are constantly communicating with the other person. They live in our prefrontal cortex and they give us really wonderful information around the people we're around in regards to safety, danger, emotional resonance. And so we use that information in the therapy. So a client may be sharing a story and it can be sometimes a bit abrupt as well. And we'll say, I noticed when you said that your affect changed. Or have you noticed through this session, you haven't taken a big breath at all? Or notice you're not breathing right now, or it's really hard for you to make eye contact. Can we pause here? And can we notice what it would be like to bring eye contact in, or what it would be like to take eye contact away for the rest of the session? And it's really interesting when you just make those body-based contact statements, how much of the experience of therapy changes, because how often, first of all, in our waking life when we're walking around, does someone actually deeply listen to us, to just our cognitive verbal story? And then also how rare is it that someone sits across from us and gives their full presence, not just my mind, my entire body. And I'm monitoring that entire body to actually be deeply attuned and listen to you. And with that level of presence, something interesting does happen, and the story does start to change. So that's kind of what a somatic psychologist does. I know if you take a little scroll on Instagram or TikTok, there'll be like lots of videos of shaking and catharsis and screaming, and that can totally be part of it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have not screamed no and held my client's hand at the top of my lungs, or had sessions where we sat on the floor together. Those things happen. But when they do happen, they've been really built into the therapy, and they're really built on this strong foundation of trust through those simple moments of saying, it's really hard for you to make eye contact with me today. Let's play with that. Mm-hmm. So it's got this little bit of experimental element to it. So that's my first answer to your second question. Yes, I trained, did a lot of ballet, had a small little moment performing with the Royal Moscow Ballet when they came to Canada. And then spent some time in the Miss Teen Canada, Miss Canada world, which feels like a whole other life. For me, both of those choices were really driven by trauma. Mm-hmm. And I feel always forever so grateful. Obviously not for my experiences of trauma. I wouldn't wish them on anyone. And if I could, but that was the circumstances in which I was born into and what happened to my body. But while those experiences of trauma were happening as a little person, I did have dance. And so it was this one place where I could express freely and move my body and be in connection to something else. And it was this one place where I felt so safe. And like anything, when that's like the only place you feel safe, you're probably going to take it to an extreme, which I absolutely did. And it led to a lot of perfectionism, a lot of overachievement, and also a lot of compensation. I had a lot of shame and self-hatred and confusion around the trauma I'd experienced and was experiencing, and creating kind of a beautiful image on the outside was one of the ways I distracted away from that. And I can definitely see that now with my personality. I'm quite introverted. A lot of the things that you would associate with someone who does pageants like really don't fit my personality, but nonetheless, it created this beautiful mask for me to kind of still be in the world and move through the world while I was hiding all this self-hatred. And so what led me to somatics, I think you can kind of pick up some of those themes there with the dance and movement being this place of free expression. I went through, I guess, what you'd call like traditional eating disorder treatment. I, did the inpatient, did the outpatient, and to great credit of those therapists, I was relatively well. I was functioning. I did respond well to that treatment. But nonetheless, when I was about 22, I would say, 22. So I'd already gone through treatment. I just kept finding myself in these like really harmful relationships, like with really unwell people, wonderful people, but like very unwell. And I was like, this is weird. Like I went through all this therapy. I know that real, like kind, loving relationships are possible. Didn't see them in my childhood, but I've been with enough therapists to know how to communicate. And yet I like am really drawn to these kind of like twisted, dark souls. Like, what is this? And so I decided to put myself in, and there's a great amount of privilege in this, decided to put myself in a trauma center program that was outpatient. And at that time, Gabor Mate was not Gabor Mate. He was just one of the clinical directors and clinical advisors at this treatment center. So all the therapists that I saw were already deeply in the work that he offers today, had deep relationships with him. And those therapists offered somatic psychotherapy. It wasn't really well known at that time. It wasn't spoken about. I remember going to the sessions and being like, that was so weird. What is happening here? This place is like, makes no sense. And like, the therapist would invite us to meditate before, go to acupuncture, do gentle movement, and then come into a therapy session. Or I remember one therapist, like the whole session, I had to have my hand on my head to contain myself. And I was like, this Donald was so weird. It changed my life that whenever I'm overwhelmed, I feel the impulse with the client to just like contain it, because it's still so ingrained that that's how I soothe my anxiety. And you look in the research behind what he was doing posturally, totally checks out. So I had this embodied experience quite young, because I do think, and what I perceived in the field, coming to somatic psychotherapy And training in that way is usually something therapists do later in their career. And because it is quite fringy and it is getting more mainstream, but it's quite unknown. So that's a bit of my journey to where I am today, and also what the heck is a somatic psychotherapist, because it's not a common thing.
That's a beautiful answer, and I think that it will resonate with so much of our community, because I know that a lot of them are also perfectionist, high achiever women. When you were saying you created this mask, I think that's something that I relate to a lot, where maybe my self-worth was not at its best. I probably used these obsessions or academic validation to mask over the fact that actually at my core, my self-worth was probably not great. And I know that that is something the community will really, really resonate with. We're going to come on to a section in just a little bit called Buy or Buy, where we'll ask you some products that whether you'd recommend them or not. But before we come into that, I wanted to ask you, who do you think benefits from somatic psychotherapy over maybe traditional psychotherapy? Because I think I've seen, again, probably some TikToks, which is not the most reliable source of information, where I think the way someone described it is, you know, a lot of women are quite emotionally in tune. They kind of understand their feelings, or they think they understand their feelings, but maybe they don't necessarily understand their nervous system reaction, or, you know, it may be more suited to those, if you feel like you understand your feelings, and maybe even you're a little bit of an overthinker, then maybe somatic therapy might be a better fit. But yeah, what's your, who do you think it's better for?
You are naming it, absolutely. I think with how somatics has been presented in online realms, it's presented as sometimes even just like a practice that you step into and you shake and you move. And I'm like, that's all great, but that's more somatic movement. That's not somatic processing. Of course, I'm a stickler for semantics because I have a master's degree in this, but I don't expect everyone else to be, so no judgment. But somatic psychotherapy is really great for those people who already have a strong cognitive framing. Because when those people go to therapy, if they already know their story and they've reframed it in their mind, and they can identify all the villains and all the good people, all the characters are well known, they'll go into talk therapy and like they might not get a lot out of it because they've already done that over processing. And we are in a culture that really does train people to do that over processing. And in some environments, that includes critical thinking, in some environments not. But we are pretty over intellectualized and pretty disembodied. So I always start my somatic therapy by kind of gauging with my client how much of their history, how much of their narrative is really clear and cohesive and known to them, because we need that strong cognitive kind of structuring to actually go into the body. And so exactly what you're saying there, the people that, you know, are quite, you know, maybe they know how to identify their emotions already, they know their history, they kind of know the areas of growth, they're going to be quite quick to benefit from somatics. It's still going to be hard. It's always hard when we've maybe really developed our mind to drop into our body and connect. It's still going to be hard, but they're going to respond a lot easier. Whereas individuals who you might assume are going to really flourish in somatic psychotherapy, like my dancers and my artists and my creatives, it's really hard for them because this is something they know quite well. They know the territory of the body, or it's become a tool or a vehicle for creativity, but it's not actually something that they have that type of relationship with. And the mind also doesn't have a story. So then we have to kind of go in and get that strong cognitive framing so we can drop into the body. Because unless we have that, it's not going to feel safe to be in the body. And that's like the piece that I always emphasize to people, is that somatics really does rely on having some type of felt sense in your body or in your mind. There has to be a capacity, because when you go into your body, you're going to be confronted with things from your own past that you've suppressed that have been too hard or have been overwhelming. These don't have to be big, acute, single incident traumas. They could be developmental traumas, consistent moments where our attachment needs weren't met. But you're also going to hit both intergenerational stuff that lives inside you, that comes from your ancestry. We're getting into the realm of epigenetics here. But one thing that I speak most kind of focused on is we get into cultural pieces too. When you go into your body, you're going to be confronted with your internalized narratives of ageism or misogyny. And you're going to have to kind of feel the stickiness of that. And also, while feeling the stickiness of that, live in a world where those narratives are still being told and they're being perpetuated, and a culture's kind of thriving off them in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cognitive piece, I always say, is so important, even though I know it's not what you see on TikTok.
It's not what you see on TikTok. Isn't that true for a lot of things? Gosh. And we've got our section Real or Real, where I'm really excited to hear your opinions on a TikTok video we've picked for you. So I'm very excited for that a little bit later on. Now we're going to move on to our buy or bye-bye section.
Yeah.
First on our buy or bye-bye section is a weighted blanket.
Yes. I personally love a weighted blanket. We know that it produces the same effects as like a baby being tightly held. And so it does activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of puts us in that beautiful rest and digest place. For some people, a weighted blanket is like the last thing they ever want because the compression and the tightness can feel claustrophobic or threatening. So I'm a big fan of them. I also probably overuse them and to the point of overheating sometimes. So beware. But they do create some really wonderful responses in the nervous system if you are someone who, when experiencing compression or tightness, goes into a parasympathetic state.
Nice. You mentioned a phrase there, which I think if more people understood it, they would understand their nervous system just immediately so much better. It's one of those terms that I think, you could understand 80% of your nervous system if you just understood this word. Parasympathetic system. Could you explain that to people who've never heard that term before?
I can, and you can please jump in. So our parasympathetic nervous system is a part of our autonomic nervous system. We have two branches, our parasympathetic and our sympathetic. Our parasympathetic is really in control of our rest and digest. So this is the state that ideally when you go to a yoga nidra class, you get into, or a spa day or any of those things. And it's so needed because it's the nervous system state that allows the gut biome, a lot of our cells to rejuvenate and to actually gives our body a little bit of that rest point. And so we need this state. We need kind of this calming down. We call it the calming down, often in common culture, but it's also associated with our window of tolerance. And so when we get into the parasympathetic state, we can replenish and restore so then we can go back out into the rest of the world. Oddly, I do think people talk more about sympathetic and like not wanting to be in a sympathetic, or we must regulate our nervous system and always live in parasympathetic. And it's ideally that these two states of the nervous system it's not like you can be in just one. They activate at the same time. And we're doing this kind of lovely dance between the two of them and not getting stuck in either.
Yeah. And then you said sympathetic. Maybe for anyone just really bringing it back to basics. Totally. What about the sympathetic? What's the explanation for that part of the nervous system?
So sympathetic nervous system is really associated to our fight and our flight. It's also associated to high cortisol, anxiety, hypervigilance, so scanning, looking around. But I also tell people it's the thing that gets you up and gets you going in the day. So we could pathologize and demonize this as being bad and wrong. And we don't ever want to be in this state because it's associated, specifically in the realm of like TikTok and social media, is associated with trauma responses. But it's also a lot of our momentum during the day as well. And one thing I always say to my female clients is that our sympathetic nervous system is also associated with our tend and befriend. So we have our fight and our flight, and we also have like our fawning response or tending and befriending. And if you've been socialized female, more commonly, you're going to move into that response pattern of making friends, soothing the other, appeasing as a part of your sympathetic response instead of, fighting or running away.
Interesting. That's really, really interesting. The next item on our buy or bye-bye is a essential oil diffuser.
I love them shamelessly. I definitely probably drive my partner a bit crazy because they're always going. Always. They're just like constant. And I'm a bit picky about them, so I actually like bring them from Canada with me. Like,
Really?
Yeah, because the quality, and there's just a little bit more testing and scrutiny around what they release in Canada versus here in the essential oil diffuser land, which I've researched. Anyways, moving that aside, we know that essential oils, they obviously stimulate the olfactory system, which is connected to our limbic brain, which is the emotional center. For someone like me and how I know my nervous system and my experiences of trauma, I find smell and scent unbelievably soothing. Like, there are certain ones that bring me back in through my limbic brain, my emotional center, to specific memories that felt so wonderful and safe and gentle that as soon as I smell cinnamon, I'm just happy again. Like, it has that much of an effect on me. I also have had clients who like smell is not their safety resource point at all. And this is, commonly spoken about in PTSD. We can get a little smell of something and maybe not even remember the full memory, but our body is going into sympathetic, some of that like maybe fight response or tension or bracing. And so this is also sometimes a part of somatic work, is really learning what of the many senses that we have, because we have more than 5, which ones actually bring me back into center and more into that regulated nervous system state. So I love an essential oil. They're everywhere in my life, but I know they're not for everyone.
I think that's a really important point for anyone trying to navigate social media where products are just being pushed on you.
Yes.
and being sold as the solutions to everything under the sun, because it is for so, in this society, we really are taught to ignore our bodies, ignore our responses. But, really not just looking at the products, but tuning into how those products make us feel is so important. Not just taking everything you see on TikTok as gospel and you need to buy this right now. I didn't ask for the weighted blanket. Do you have any recommendations that you like? Because they can get quite high in price. And I guess for someone who maybe you don't want to spend that money and then for it to feel really claustrophobic.
Yeah, such a good question. My weighted blanket was a gift from my partner, but I have looked recently and been like, whoa, this is such a massive price range. I mean, there's so many things you can try even before putting that claustrophobic feeling. I mean, like if you're someone who has 3 blankets on you and that's wiggly and uncomfortable, or you don't like a big squeezed hug, don't go near a weighted blanket. Like, this is not, so you can get this kind of tightness compression feeling before even purchasing. That would be my answer to that one. So not one specific product, unfortunately.
No, that's really, really, really helpful. Next is a yoga mat or resistance bands.
Yeah, I have them both. I have all the things here. With both of these products, I would just encourage people to not let them be the barrier for entry. Yes, it's wonderful to have a yoga mat, to be like, this is where I do my gentle movement at home, but it's also not needed. You don't need to be on your mat. You don't need a resistance band to do those exercises or to engage with your body in that way. So if that helps you get out and add gentle movement or movement into your day, wonderful, but it's also not needed. And I'm someone who, I used to travel the world with my yoga mat, and now oftentimes it just kind of sits there and I do my gentle movement, not on it, because I actually can't be bothered.
Nice. That's such an important point, not making it a barrier for entry. Yeah. Journals or guided self-help notebooks?
Yeah. I don't know. So I would love to answer this like so enthusiastically. Yes. Being trained in somatic therapy, being trained in narrative therapy, loving writing, loving the practice. For me, they've never worked. I find them a bit too formed by positive psychology. And so then I find like doing the prompts oftentimes leads me to bypassing things. And I've tried really hard. And so that's my encouragement for people. It's just to really look at the prompts and what angle are the prompts coming from? Are they the same every single day? Are they just framing the positive, or are they allowing you to have some space for the negative? I know Danielle Laporte used to have a beautiful product that actually had space for both. I really loved it. I also know Ruby Carr has a book called Healing Through Words, and that one I've like really enjoyed doing. But I know that there's a lot of them out there, and I've been really surprised. I still don't know a client who's actually made the full way through the journal, like actually through. I think it sometimes can, these issues of like, you know, not being able to, the prompts not providing access to go into those deeper places can be a little bit of a turnoff for people, even though I would love to say yes. Because in theory, I totally back them.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. But for anyone listening, what do you mean by positive psychology?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Obviously, affirmations, doing affirmations, daily gratitude practices are wonderful and great. And they can be like putting whipped cream on garbage. And I say that to my clients, like, if this feels like putting whipped cream on garbage, there is research that actually just focusing on the positive also brings your mind into duality to be aware of the negative that's stopping you from feeling the positive. So sometimes it can be really helpful. Just take that out. So just going to take it out. And we're going to look for moments where you genuinely feel a little different. I'm not even saying happy to my clients. I'm like, just acknowledge the moments when you feel a little different, and then build off those, work with those moments where you did actually notice the heat of the sun after 3 months of rain in London. Like, let's go there. Instead of, I'm going to write all the things I'm grateful for that I actually don't feel grateful for. And that's where my caution point is with some of those books, even though that's obviously not their intention. Sometimes it just can be a byproduct.
That's really interesting you say that about positive affirmations, because I've said before, as from a imposter syndrome point of view, I think women just, again, have lost sight of how they truly feel, and actually in losing sight of how they truly feel, lose sight of what is true. And that, I think, lends itself to imposter syndrome. So when I learned this when I was starting working as a doctor, where actually in my first few weeks, you're just learning, you are kind of bad at, you're not great at your job at that point, because you've just started your job.
Yeah.
And I found that actually accepting that in myself, saying, right now you have a lot to learn, and not trying to mask over it by doing a positive affirmation and saying, Faye, you're brilliant, Faye, you're this, when actually I was not at that point, but instead focusing on, if I did something little that was good, I focused on that. Or if someone gave me a piece of feedback that was helpful to me, you know, focusing on that, focusing on the points of truth rather than just trying to mask over everything. So, and that was something I experienced. So I feel very validated that you've kind of reiterated that, you know, sometimes it's important to get comfortable with what is actually going on and tune into that rather than just putting whipped cream on garbage.
Yeah. And I think now my like little resistance or aversion, which I'm very aware of inside myself, also comes from just seeing how commodified that one practice has become, like having your whatever journal beside your green juice and your data. I'm like, how many pictures of that are there on Instagram and videos? And I'm like, okay, this is really interesting, because ideally, in an ideal world, if we are getting in touch with our bodies and we are really coming home, we actually start to let go of some of that stuff, of some of the capitalism or needing to purchase something or needing to put it on social media. Those practices, and the journal could still be a part of that, I have no idea, those practices actually become less interesting to showcase to the world, because we're just actually living in that state. And so we don't need these external markers, like it's kind of become that we're like well or happy or balanced or all those things. And I think that's a part of where my aversion comes from. It's just like, if I see another video with one of those journals in it, I don't know.
I think that's so fair. That's a really useful viewpoint. Really, really useful viewpoint. Because do you know what? I've been there where I'm like, maybe this will fix my mental health.
Well, I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
fair enough.
No, that's brilliant. Foam roller or a massage tool?
Also, really big fan of both. Our fascia holds so much. So if you don't know, fascia is kind of the spider web. I'm going to describe it as the spider web tissue that kind of holds your whole body together. Insert any commentary you want to put on that.
No, I think that's a brilliant way to describe it.
That's my very simple term way I describe it to clients. And because it is that connective tissue, when we do something like foam rolling or a facial roller, we do start to kind of move that around. And we know that when we experience stress, overwhelm, or trauma, our body braces and holds tension unless we complete our stress response cycle. So any of those tools can be really amazing to just kind of subtly poke at or subtly change some of that tension and that bracing and lead to what it feels somatically like a release. It's not a release of the experience, just it can feel like a release or a sense of release. So I use them often. I'm often like face rolling while I'm doing emails. I have it all the time. I actually got told by my TMJ physiotherapist that I needed to stop because I was I had overworked a muscle in some way, so it was causing like tension somewhere else. So she was like, no more for like 3 months. You need to stop. So I'm just like compulsively.
That's the perfectionist overachiever that I can really, really relate to. I'm like, oh, I can do this. Yeah. I'm going to do it 150%.
Yeah. She was like, never twice a day. I was like, okay,
never mind.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm off it right now, but I deeply miss it.
Nice.
Yeah.
You said something that I think is really, really important to go into a bit deeper is the stress response cycle. Can you talk us through what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So it does tie back to our autonomic nervous system and the parasympathetic. So again, that's that rest and digest place that you maybe get to go when you do yoga nidra or something like that. And our sympathetic, so that fight or flight or kind of tend and befriend, fawning, which is more socially trained into people. So when we go through any type of experience, that could be getting on the tube and feeling claustrophobic because maybe you don't like compression or tightness on you. Don't get a weighted blanket if this is you. Or it could be, seeing 1,000 emails and you're like, I don't know how to answer this. Or an experience of trauma. Any of these things that overwhelm our body's capacity to stay connected to self or other are going to put us in this stress response cycle to some degree or another. Obviously, when we see our emails, it's not going to be as an extreme of response as potentially a trauma. Maybe it is for you. Not my place to judge that or say. But nonetheless, it activates the stress response cycle. And so when that happens and we don't get to actually complete, so when thousands of years ago, or maybe not even, depending on your ancestry, when we get into our stress response cycle, maybe we saw a threat, a lion, someone that we thought was going to harm us, the stress response cycle would mobilize and we would fight or we'd freeze. And then later, as civilization, but also the technological development, we kind of had those more tend and befriend. And so what happens when we go in that stress response, our body still thinks that the lion or the threat is there and it starts to mobilize. But because it is just emails, we don't complete it. We don't actually run. We just kind of move on with our day. And essentially that accumulates throughout our day and our lifetime, and it leads to patterns of tension, to bracing, disconnection from the body, numbness, all these types of things. So when someone comes to see a somatic psychotherapist, what I'm actually really listening for right at the start, and this is why the narrative is important, is to find out when they experience a stressor, overwhelm, again, trauma, could be a relational breakdown. It's not my job, again, to judge. Whatever activates the stress response, where do they most commonly go? And I've been trained to be able to read that through their breath pattern, through their eye contact, through their movement, and through their posture. So I already have a sense of that. And then my job is ideally, when they're sharing about their present moment, through acknowledging the body and naming the breath or the eye contact or whatever it is, inviting them to kind of amp up that stress response a little bit in the therapy room, which we can do through the body. So then they actually get an experience of completing. So completing could look like shaking. It could look like saying no really loudly. It could look like getting up. It could look all different types of way. But this is the kind of stress response cycle. Emily Najowski does a wonderful job of tying the stress response cycle into pleasure and sexuality. And I always invite people to go give her kind of a check out in that area because she does a wonderful job of bringing it out of the realm of trauma and into just our daily lives, like I've just tried to do, so that, because it does oftentimes get really associated to trauma when in actuality it's happening all the time.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting. Final buy or bye-bye is acupressure mats and foot massages.
I love it. Again, have them both. Have an acupressure mat for my feet that like sits under there when I see clients. So yeah, definitely practice in those. Again, not for everyone. I know some people that absolutely detest them, do not like them at all. I've had periods in my life where I can't go near them because it just feels, my body feels too sensitive. There's too much hypervigilance. I'm in a stress response where I'm just like, my body's way too overwhelmed for that type of contact. And then there's sometimes it feels great. So again, you kind of already know, like if you are someone who when stressed doesn't like to be touched, that would be something I'd invite you to like be a little bit more gentle and exploring. Maybe just get the acupressure ring and you can kind of tell before going into like purchasing the whole thing.
Fab. You also mentioned something a little bit earlier on that you've got TMJ, and
yes,
oh my gosh, I got my first ever facial massage, and like I'm not someone who consciously is aware that I'm stressed, but subconsciously, you know, all in my body the signs are just, you know, always there. And I got this facial massage as part of a YouTube video where I was looking into really like high-end beauty treatments, and it was at the end of a week where I was just filming every single day, like 8 hours a day, just getting in an Uber from one place to the next constantly all day. And this Friday, and she starts going on my jaw like an inside buccal massage, and she was like, wow, that's very, very, very tense. And then she did the one side and not the other one, and oh my gosh, the difference I could feel in my jaw on one side was ridiculous. And I know that I definitely hold a lot of tension in my jaw, and I know a lot of my friends who definitely have like TMJ because they get so much pain associated to it. So we'll definitely have to come on to that a little bit later on. And also burnout. I can't wait to hear all your opinions on burnout. But first, we've got some community questions.
Okay.
So the first community question is, how can trauma affect the mind-body connection?
So trauma can, in many ways, just cut off the mind-body connection. And I use the statistic loosely, but we know that the mind filters in like 0.0001% of all of the sensory information around us, and the body filters in the rest. And that quote is from a book called The Awakening Body by Reggie Ray. So you can go read about it over there. And so when trauma happens, it essentially, or it can overwhelm the mind. So the mind doesn't have a story of it. It may not even have a memory of it. And the body takes in everything else. And again, the definition of trauma that I like to use is it's anything that overwhelms our capacity to stay connected to self or to other. And so when we're overwhelmed and we lose that capacity to stay connected to you, my mirror neurons can no longer regulate with yours. I can no longer feel my own breath because, again, my body has taken in way more of the experience than my mind. This is what creates trauma, but also severs the connection with the body. One thing that I feel like is really important to name in how trauma interrupts the mind-body relationship is that there is a lot of dialogue, as I just contributed in, around how trauma can numb the body or lead us to be disconnected from the body. One of the other things that it can do is it can lead us to be very hypervigilant of our body and very like sensitive and aware, and maybe even experience things like hypochondria, because our threat response in our brain, our amygdala, the fighter, that's constantly the little firefighter in there who's looking around for danger, is now super primed. It's like, body is different, don't know what's going on, something has happened, and now I'm going to fire every time I feel a sensation that's outside of my normal, outside of what I knew before this trauma occurred. So we can be totally disconnected from our body after trauma, or we can be so acutely aware of our body after trauma. And this is how it changes the relationship. And there's no way of predicting which way someone is going to go.
That's really, really brilliant, because I had the first time I became a bit more aware of maybe the body response to trauma was a TikTok where the person was saying how you can tell maybe if you're in fight or flight by if someone sneaks up behind you or someone is nearby and everything is just making you jump, that hypervigilance. And I saw this TikTok, and maybe a couple of days later I noticed that like I'm at that period of my life when I definitely had recently gone through something quite traumatic and was working very hard at the same time, very, stressed. And everything just really made me jump. I was so skitty. So that's really useful. The other part of that question for the community question was, how can we strengthen that mind-body connection if it has been severed?
Absolutely. This is the work of interoceptive awareness, or cultivating your interoceptive awareness. So your interoceptive awareness, I know it can be like a little bit of a daunting word there. It's just your capacity to be connected to your body, to feel your body. We strengthen our interoceptive awareness by noticing our breath patterns, by using self-touch, which stimulates oxytocin and lowers our cortisol. We just become aware of those signs of fullness, of hunger. So I always say to people, if you want to kind of reconnect to the body, this is going to be a part of the process. And there are so many ways. For myself, bringing it back, I named the olfactory, like using smell as a way of like noticing my body and using your senses in this way to actually start to be able to sense into what's happening inside. Because this is not something that we receive education in or training in or awareness of. So it's going to be really hard. Most people, when I start working with them, they don't know what thirst feels like in their body. They don't know what hunger feels like. And so it's like, hey, like, let's go back to the basics of just, do you actually feel your rib cage move as you breathe? Okay, let's start there. And we subtly and slowly build on it. It's like building any other muscle. And this is actually one place where I do think that metaphor actually plays out quite well. It's a lot of places it's overused. And I'm like, ooh, don't know if fitness needs to be applied here. But this is one area where absolutely building our interoceptive awareness is like building a muscle. And to do that, we do need to engage with it.
Nice. I love that. The next community question that we had was, somatic symptoms, why do we have these and how do they develop, and what is the best way to manage them?
Yeah. So somatic symptoms are oftentimes a result of that stress response cycle not completing. So when the stress response cycle doesn't complete, we don't get that moment where we're like, I got away from the tiger that was chasing me, or the threat is totally gone and my body can kind of shake or process. I have a small puppy right now. And so whenever she has an overwhelming experience, like a bus goes by or a dog barks, she like looks at me with her like little scared eyes and then she shakes. And I'm like, that's her stress response cycle completing. She looks to me, she's attuned, she radars me as a safe person. And then her little nervous system goes, I need to discharge. Okay, now I can come back into self. We are just like her. And so we need to complete our stress response cycle. But obviously that doesn't happen. And it's been trained out of us in a lot of ways to be still or to be rigid, or to just also not engage in some of the practices that we would need to complete our stress response cycle. And so when that happens, and you'll probably be able to add to this, we experience chronic tension or bracing in the body. And all of that has a cumulative effect on our fascia, on our musculoskeletal system, on our hormones, and on our brain. And slowly over time, we start noticing maybe the chronic tension or the bracing or the excruciating pain in our TMJ. But nonetheless, that's been an accumulation over a very long time of things that have been happening in the body, maybe under our awareness.
I would love to talk to you about your personal self-care routine and living in this fast-paced life, because I imagine you are an incredibly successful woman in yourself, and I think that often lends itself to having a more dysregulated nervous system. But first, we're going to come on to our section called Real or Not Real. Real or Real, as in Instagram Reel. And I'm going to play a TikTok, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
You're not a candle. You can't burn out. A human being cannot burn out. I think that that's a misconception about hard work. I don't know successful people who are still in the game who are burnt out by a long day. Their response might be, I want to go do something different for a minute. But my business partner, Grant Cardone, he says, you're not a candle. You can't burn out. A human being cannot burn out. Can you feel moments of pressure, stress? Yes. I don't take any of those moments as being a bad thing. It's not a negative to feel overwhelmed because you have responsibility. People depend on you. People are relying on you to do something. Great.
So why do people burn out then, in your view?
The thing that people do is not actually leading to where they want to go. But if I think that by doing this work, that's going to be hard and I'm going to hate and it's going to suck, that I can actually get what I want and my life would be changed, I would recognize that this is a step that's necessary to get to my goal. And when people win, they are rarely burnt out at that moment. And you only really get burnt out if you don't see how the sacrifices that you're making are actually going to lead you to achieve your goals and to reach your potential.
Thoughts?
Many thoughts as I take my long pause. Burnout is absolutely a real phenomenon. I mean, in 2019, the World Health Organization put it in the ICI-11. Consistent workplace stress has impact. And in a lot of Asian cultures, there's documented names for death related to workplace stress of working more than 55 hours a week. So the comment of burnout not being real is just like, okay, maybe from your place of privilege, this isn't real. And I think this is the really important thing to hold, specifically in a comment like that. And we could really get into her and her story and make judgments. Or there's the place where you can step back and go like, if we are in a place of privilege where we get to reach our goals, see the trajectory of all the work and effort we have into manifesting or creating the life that we want, if we have that privilege, of course it's going to breed a mindset like that. Even if you came from a place of marginalization or being impoverished and you've scraped your way out, there were probably some privileges or some people with a lot of privilege who helped you up that trajectory. And when you find yourself in the position that someone, it seems as her to find herself in, even in that conversation, has had, you probably no longer have those scarcities or realities of, if I take a misstep, I'm going to lose everything, unless you are intentionally kind of gambling and, investing in very high risk ways. You're unlikely ever going to find yourself in a place where you are defaulting or feel like there's nothing left to catch you. And so logically, I can follow her and be like, yep, I can get it. If we don't have a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, we're, not going to experience burnout because we have that. But the reality is that most people are going to experience burnout because our system is not designed for all of us to thrive, to reach our highest potential, our goals. Do I wish it was? Absolutely. But is it? No. And can we be real and honest about that so that we can acknowledge that things like burnout do exist? We are candles. We do die. Like, we do have endings. If we aren't taken care of appropriately, if we aren't cared for by our society around us, we are going to have negative mental health impacts. And so for me, any of us, myself included, we can't see the privileges in which we have, and they are our blind spots. And that's just someone speaking from a blind spot.
I think that's explained absolutely wonderfully. And it makes me think of the time when I was working as a doctor, but then trying to do all the social media stuff on top of that. So I was working, 50+ hour weeks just in the hospital. And then I was working 2 hours in the morning before I went into the hospital for all the social media stuff, making sure my assistant had stuff to be cracking on with during the day, editors. And then when I got back after a 12-hour shift, I would put in 2 extra hours of work and then go to bed. And often people I meet would say to me, like, how are you still alive?
Yeah.
How are you doing all this? And I was teetering on the edge of burnout for those 2 years. The only thing that got me through was knowing that it was just 2 years I could just get through, but also those privileges where my boyfriend would pick me up from my shifts whenever he could. That's a privilege that not everyone has. Or I don't think I cooked a single meal myself for months, because he would do all the cooking, all the washing, just to make sure that I was supported in trying to make all this work. Those are privileges that not everyone is aware of. Or if I had quite a stressful shift, or say, to come to this podcast today, I know that I do a better job during the recording if my nervous system is calm, I'm regulated, I'm able to review all my notes and stuff before I come in. So I booked an Uber to come here instead of getting London public transport. All these little things that really contribute. And actually, when you're not in a different position, you don't have access to those things. You've got to keep so many plates spinning at once. So I really love how you've explained that. And it really resonates with me as well. The next community question that we have is how to deal with stress and anxiety and PTSD from being bullied as a child.
So I'll break these two questions apart because...
Sorry, I've been asking some big questions.
I'm going to pull them apart because I want to give the experience of being bullied like as much tenderness and care to itself. So how to deal with stress and anxiety. We know that anxiety runs the same circuitry in the brain as excitement. And I love that piece of information because it really does. And this is where maybe some of those journaling books we spoke about earlier might be quite helpful. If we can change the story around our anxiety, or also just slow down and get really aware, is this anxiety that's actually fueled by my threat response? Or am I on the verge of something new and unknown and that's scary, but also something I want? Can be really helpful in just pulling those apart. And then working with anxiety in such a way where we do keep really questioning, is this some part of my brilliant body that's picking up information that my mind doesn't have access to? And so this is going on and I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed. Or is this just my response to something new because of my past environment? Maybe this is how my body has been conditioned to experience the world. There's no judgment in that. It's just completing the stress response cycle so that the anxiety can lessen. To your second part of the question, to the second part of your question, I wanted to pull them apart because I don't perceive, or how I speak about bullying is not really in the realm of anxiety or stress response. I do really hold it in the realm of trauma. And I know that there's kind of a rhetoric of everything is being called trauma. And so when I say the experience of bullying, I pull it out of anxiety and into the realm of trauma. I'm specifically talking about developmental trauma. And developmental trauma is not a single incident, it's ongoing and it's continuous. And the example that I really love to give, and we'll keep it quite sweet and quite simple. We've all can remember, or we have seen a small child who maybe has gone to school and made an amazing piece of macaroni art. There's glitter and paint and all the things, and they're super excited. And they come home and they go to show mom, and mom's on the phone, or mom is busy with the other 3 children, or the maternal figure or parental figure just doesn't have capacity. And because that child is very resilient, they go, my art is still amazing. I'm going to find someone else in this household to go show. So they go to another paternal figure if they're there, or someone else in the household. And again, really excited about their macaroni art. They want to show, they want to share, they want to be connected. And again, they get maybe that rejection, or they get a dismissive response. You put experiences like that consequentially together over a long period of time, where the child came with a developmental need, an attachment need, an emotional need, a psychological need, a relational need, and it goes unmet, that's going to cause developmental trauma. So if we hold that as developmental trauma, and it's often harder because of the climate that we live in socioculturally for those clients to acknowledge that they've experienced trauma, because they go, well, I had a great mom. All my needs were met. Like, they were always there. I'm like, no, but were they there for the macaroni art? Like, this is what I need to know, because those moments add up to something quite significant. Bullying is the same. It doesn't have to be so overt in the ways of, you know, maybe being physically harmed or a terrible rumor being spread around you. It can also be that social alienation that children do when sometimes they ignore someone, or they, you know, put someone as the black sheep for 3 months. That adds up for that entire period of time. That child's relational, peer, emotional, and psychological needs are not being met. And that has an impact. And that is something that I spend a lot of time with. Specifically, it's come up more commonly, at least in my practice, with my female clients. And there could be many reasons for that, is that they often do have this experience in their younger years, and that it's really, really hard for them to put a label on it, to acknowledge it as trauma, to even name that it's impacted them, even though it's so present in not only the relationships they have with other women, but also their romantic relationships too. And I think that there can be a lot of internalized shame, and there's a lot of narratives to just like let the things go that happened way back when. But until we actually acknowledge that, yeah, that rumor actually did impact your sexuality, or it did change how you behaved, or because of you were ignored in the classroom, you did start to dress in a different way, and that actually did play out into your 20s. Until that stuff is really acknowledged and really held and really met by someone who goes, yeah, I see it impacted you and it wasn't okay. It shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry. It does continue to play out. So whenever I have a client come in and they say they've experienced bullying, my whole nervous system and whole heart and whole body just becomes so attuned, so present, because they're commonly culturally just experiences that we don't name, or we name them in a really dismissive, minimizing way. And that is absolutely not what they deserve.
It's really interesting as you were going through a lot of those examples, even the macaroni art, I thought of one example in my life that seemingly seems so small, and I never would have thought of that as a traumatic moment as such. But, and then, you know, when you're saying about the social stuff as a child, and, you know, everything you were saying were bringing up these memories where I was like, God, they probably have impacted me a lot more than I have realized, or created a cascade of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that would be beneficial for me to address. So fast-paced living in today's society, what is your routine for dealing with the constant pressures, the constant information that is being fed to us that is inherently quite dysregulating?
Yeah, I wish that I had like a really beautifully prescriptive routine that was like, do this, this, and this, and you'll be fine. I don't, unfortunately. And just like a lot of other people, I experience the city that we both call home, London, to be quite overwhelming and just constantly a lot. And my nervous system is bombarded, and I walk around everywhere with my loop earplugs, which I love. That may be the one thing. Love a good pair of loop earplugs.
I also love my loops as well, so I can relate to that. Yes.
But besides that, whenever I'm speaking about the realm of self-care, just as one way, I think, of moving away from the commodification of it, and from moving away of people feeling like they need to spend more money to access well-being, or that spending money is a sign of caring for themselves. It's not. It doesn't have to be. There's so many ways to take care of yourself. I always just go back into the basics. And those are the things that I challenge myself with, because I still find them like really hard. Like to be like, with my, you know, body and the illness that I live with, I need 9.5 hours of sleep. Like, anything less than that, the last time I got 9.5 hours of sleep, my hair got caught in a vacuum. Like,
Oh no.
yes, which is like quite a meltdown moment for me. But like, I seriously need that. I've learned that about myself. It's tried, it's tested, it's true. That for me is self-care, giving myself those 9.5 hours, ensuring that I'm drinking all of my water, that I have 3 beautiful meals that have all of, different color vegetables, and they're cooked with care and love and intention. I bring my self-care back into those really basic foundational blocks. And the way I think about it is actually of like, I know all of the blood in my body in 3 months is going to turn over. I know every single cell in my body is constantly changing. How can I support all of the little changes that are happening inside of me through this action or this behavior? How can I make the foundation of the body that's changing and evolving and growing care? And so I don't go to like think of the spa or even the yoga class anymore. It's so much more those basics for me. And I found with that, it took off a lot of the pressure as well too. And yeah, a lot of the pressure. I'm definitely not as up on the wellness or biohacking trends anymore, but I do get my 9.5 hours of sleep now, and that's pretty good.
And that's it, that's not as sexy as what
No, it's
sells
not
on
sexy.
social media, is it? That's the nuanced approach is never what gets the most attention.
No.
And the whole biohacking thing, it's like you could be doing all these crazy, wonderful trends, but if you're sleeping less than 6 hours a night, there is no point whatsoever. And that's what I personally completely resonate with in terms of the social media trends and stuff. Last question before we ask the final question that we ask all of our guests. You mentioned that you struggle with TMJ.
I do.
What is TMJ, and how, for the girlies out there who do hold a lot of tension in their jaw, how have you managed to tackle that?
Yeah. So this is like my tension point. It's where all of it lives. I know there's some loose research around the TMJ and hips paralleling each other in regards to muscular structuring, just even energetic components when we look at Chinese medicine. And so for me, I've always because I've had that frame, I've always kind of held like, okay, like, is my trauma, are there trauma links here? Are there not? And like someone can go down that realm and explore it if that's interesting to them, but I'll kind of keep it on the TMJ focused. I do a lot of facial rolling, as I named, but I also highly recommend people, if they do have TMJ, go to a physiotherapist who's trained in TMJ. I was so resistant for such a long time. I was like, I will deal with this by getting things like Botox into my masseter muscles. Did not help me at all. I've had surgery on my jaw for my TMJ. Like I've had like this whole journey. And the one thing, whenever I have a client who comes and they have a tense jaw muscle, and you can kind of see it in someone's face too, and how it changes the face if you're like a clencher. And you have done things like somatic therapy, and maybe it can't address, or this is just your muscular patterning. I don't have a lot of tension in any other area of my body. This is where it all likes to live. I could probably go into a nice psycho-spiritual answer for you, but I'll save that. I would recommend people go to a physiotherapist, because when you have someone who actually knows how to track where all this tension is coming through your cranial nerves, through your sternum, through your abdominal, how you're breathing,
Wow.
it changes. And every time I see Helen, I have a spiritual experience. Helen is not in a bougie place. She's in the most kind of basic and boring clinic in Chelsea. I love you, Helen, if you ever listen to this. But like, and it's incredible. So all the girlies out there, go see a good physiotherapist who's put their life into learning how to take care of this one area of your body, because you are deserving of it. And there's someone who can help you. And you'll just a few sessions, and it is a game changer.
We might have to get Helen's
yeah.
details to put in the description for all those girlies. That's absolutely incredible, because I've done the Masters of Botox, and still there.
Yeah, for me, it didn't change much. I was like, oh, my face is just kind of thinner now.
Yeah.
But like, same.
Yeah, aesthetically, I was like, fun, but like, the issue. Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to ask you the final question that we've been asking all our guests, and that is, Ailey, what do you wish every woman knew before she was 25?
Oh.
I've asked a lot of big questions, but maybe that one is the biggest.
That one is the biggest, definitely. Oh, I'm just thinking of so many of my clients under the age of 25, but also my younger self under that age. There is one thing that I wish that women under the age of 25 knew. It is that their body is their only home. They are the only person who can actually ever be there. It belongs to no one else. It's theirs. And that there is an entire world and systems and structures and people who are doing everything they can every single day to take you away from that home and tell you that it's not. And that would be the thing that I wish I could go back in time and wrap my younger self in, and also wrap all of my clients in as well.
I love that, and I feel wrapped in it now. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Ailey, for coming on this podcast. I hope the listeners have had as much of a calming experience as I have. You explain things so wonderfully, and it's in such a calming way. I really, really, really am grateful. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was lovely to spend time with you. And you just have, again, a very warm and friendly and very inclusive energy. And I really loved your questions. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.